I'm leaving you. I'm moving to Palm Springs with my 25-year-old boyfriend, and I'm taking all our money with me. The text arrived at exactly 3 a.m. local time in the Persian Gulf, just minutes after I finished a brutal 14-hour shift on the oil rig. My name is Miles Harrington. I'm 52 years old, and for the last 27 years, I've worked on oil platforms scattered across the world. From the Gulf of Mexico to the North Sea to the burning heat of the Middle East, rigs have been my life. My hands were still covered in grease when I opened a message from Krista, my wife of 18 years. For a long moment, I just stared at the screen. Then another message appeared. It was a screenshot of our joint bank account. The balance showed $0. 2 cents, where $142,000 should have been. Under the screenshot, she added a little kiss emoji, like the whole situation was somehow cute. I didn't throw my phone across the room. I didn't punch a wall. I didn't yell. Instead, I just sat quietly on my narrow bunk in the cramped quarters I shared with 2 other rig workers. The air smelled like diesel, sweat, and salt water. After a few seconds, I typed back a single sentence. Sure, good luck. Then I turned my phone off. I stood up, grabbed a towel, and walked down the metal hallway to take a shower. The next morning, the guys could tell something wasn't right. Normally, I was the first one in the mess hall for breakfast. Coffee, eggs, and a quick briefing before the shift started. But that morning, I skipped breakfast entirely and went straight to work. Jackson, my second in command, kept glancing at me during safety inspections. He could tell something was wrong. But Jackson had worked rigs long enough to understand one thing. You don't ask personal questions unless someone wants to talk. We had 16 workers relying on us to keep the entire floating steel city running safely. On a rig, distractions get people killed. So work came first. Everything else stayed personal. Later during lunch break, I turned my phone back on. Dozens of notifications appeared immediately. Missed calls, messages, emails. One email caught my attention. It was from a divorce lawyer. Krista had already filed paperwork. The document claimed that I had abandoned the marriage because I worked overseas too often, according to her statement. She had been forced to seek emotional stability elsewhere. She had also hired an attorney named Bradley, a lawyer who specialized in high-asset divorce cases. The paperwork requested spousal support, arguing that my oil rig salary was excessive compared to her income. Then came the part that made me pause. In the filing, she stated that her emotional support partner was currently living in our house in Odessa, her boyfriend living in my house, while I was still halfway across the world. I slowly closed my laptop. Then I went back to work. I didn't say a word to anyone. That night, after the shift ended, I sat down and wrote exactly one email. But it wasn't to Krista. It was to my cousin Brendan, who worked as an accountant in Houston. The email only contained a single sentence. Time to activate Protocol Winter. That phrase was something Brendan and I had come up with years earlier. No explanation was needed. 3 minutes later, my inbox chimed. His response had already arrived. Already on it. Don't respond to anything until you're back in States. I still had 2 weeks left on my rotation. 2 more weeks of 12-hour shifts in 110-degree heat. 2 more weeks while the life I thought I had built back home quietly collapsed. Technically, I could have asked for emergency leave. Most supervisors would have approved it. But leaving early wouldn't change anything. The money was already gone. The marriage was already over. And the rig still needed to operate. So I stayed, finished the job, collected the paycheck. Later that night, just before lights out, the rig supervisor stopped by my quarters. Vincent had been working offshore almost as long as I had. He leaned against the doorframe and looked at me carefully. "Everything stable?" he asked. He wasn't talking about the drilling equipment. I met his eyes. "Everything's under control." He studied me for another second. Then he nodded once and walked away. And the truth was, everything was under control. Just not in the way Krista imagined. I first met Krista 19 years ago in a small fishing supply store owned by a friend of mine in Odessa, Texas. She was 31 at the time, working behind the register. She had this easy laugh and a sharp sense of humor. I remember she was joking with a customer about people from the city who thought catching bass required expensive equipment. All you really need, she told him, is patience and a little common sense. I liked her immediately. At that time, I was 33 years old and already 10 years into my career working oil rigs. I was home between contracts and helping my friend restock inventory at the store. Krista and I talked for almost an hour that day. A week later, we went on our first date. 11 months after that, we were married. Looking back, it happened fast, but at the time, it made perfect sense. By then, I had already built a solid life for myself. Years earlier, I had made a lucky investment in a small oil producer that eventually got bought out by a larger company. The payout from that deal allowed me to buy my house outright. No mortgage. My career on international rigs was steady, and the pay was better than most people in Odessa could imagine. Krista said she admired that about me. My discipline, my focus, my stability, and I admired her energy. She could walk into a room full of strangers, and within 10 minutes, everyone would be laughing at her jokes. Our biggest challenge was always my work schedule. Back then, my rotation was 2 months on the rig and 1 month home. But the money made the sacrifice worth it. In 6 months, I could earn what many people in our town earned in 3 years. So we made an agreement. She would take care of the house. I would build our financial future. For a long time, it worked. Around our 12th year of marriage, small cracks began to appear. Nothing dramatic at first. Just little complaints. Missed birthdays. Comments about me not being around for holidays. Occasional arguments about whether I really needed to accept contracts overseas. She would mention how her friends' husbands were always home for dinner parties. Looking back now, those were warning signs. But at the time, I brushed them off. Long-distance marriages require compromise. I thought we were just going through a normal phase. The year I turned 47, something changed. Krista stopped asking when I would be home. She stopped sending photos of what she was doing during the day. Our video calls became shorter and less frequent, but I told myself it was normal. After nearly 2 decades of marriage, excitement fades and routine takes over. At least that's what I believed. Last Christmas, I returned home to Odessa and immediately noticed something strange. The entire house looked different. New furniture, different paint colors, new decorations. The place barely resembled the home I had left 2 months earlier. When I asked Krista about it, she just shrugged. I needed a change, she said. I didn't ask what kind of change she meant. Maybe I should have. 2 months before my current rotation, I noticed something unusual while reviewing our bank statements. Several transfers had been made from our joint account to another account I didn't recognize. When I asked Krista about it, she gave a quick explanation. House repairs, she said. The foundation needs work. That sounded expensive, but reasonable. Still, something about it felt strange. The week before I left for this rotation, I drove past the house one evening. There were no construction trucks, no workers, no repair equipment. But there was something else. A black Audi parked in the driveway. A car I had never seen before. When I asked Krista about it, she told me it belonged to a friend who had stopped by. I didn't push the issue. For weeks ago, she stopped answering my calls completely. Instead, she would send short texts saying she was busy with a new project. At one point, I even considered flying home early. But after 18 years of marriage, I convinced myself to trust my wife. 3 days before her message arrived, our neighbor Harold sent me a picture. It showed a moving truck parked in front of my house. His text message only said, "Thought you should know." I didn't respond. I just waited. Sometimes the smartest thing a man can do is nothing at all. Because if you wait long enough, the truth usually reveals itself. The day after Krista's message, I finished my shift and walked back to my quarters. The sun was already setting over the Persian Gulf, turning the water a dull shade of orange. Just as I stepped inside, the satellite phone on the wall rang. It was Brendan. "You sitting down?" he asked. "Just tell me." I replied. Brendan didn't soften the news. "She's been planning this for at least 14 months. He said. "Regular transfers from your joint account into another account under her maiden name. At first they were small. 2,000 here, 3,000 there. Nothing that would immediately raise suspicion. But in the last 90 days, the transfers got bigger. Total amount moved so far, $214,000. That number hit harder than the message itself. That was far more than the $142,000 she had taken from the joint account. There's more, Brendan continued. She changed the beneficiary on your life insurance policy 6 months ago, and she took out a $40,000 home equity line of credit on the house. How? I asked. Your signature, Brendan said quietly, except it's forged. I sat down slowly on the edge of my bunk. The rig's generators hummed beneath the metal floor. 18 years together, and for more than a year she had been slowly erasing me from my own life. The guy, I finally asked. What about him? Brendan sighed. His name is Devin Forrester, 25 years old, former personal trainer. No steady job for the last 3 years. 3 previous relationships with women over 45. And every single one ended within 18 months. The pattern was obvious. And Miles, Brendan said quietly. There are credit card charges for 2 one-way plane tickets to Palm Springs. Departure date is next Tuesday. 3 days away. She wasn't just leaving. She was trying to disappear before I even made it home. 38 hours after my rotation ended, I landed in Houston. Brendan met me at the airport with a folder full of documents and a prepaid phone. She's been calling your regular number nonstop, he said as we walked toward his car. The bank froze the account she transferred the money into. Large, unusual transactions triggered an investigation. They want you to verify the transfer in person. Does she know I'm back? I asked. No, Brendan said. Only me and your lawyer. My lawyer's name was Thomas. We drove straight to his office. By the time we arrived, Thomas already had a full legal strategy prepared. Krista had filed a domestic violence claim against me the day before. She claimed she fled the marriage because of emotional abuse and financial control. The accusation would normally help her gain sympathy from a judge, but she had overlooked one important detail. For the last 7 weeks, I had been working on an oil platform 6,000 miles away. Company security logs, passport records, satellite phone data. Everything proved my location. The accusation collapsed instantly. Thomas filed several motions immediately. Fraud, forgery, asset freezing, dismissal of her domestic violence claim, but the most damaging evidence came from Krista's own phone, because she had set up her new phone using my Apple account. Every text message had automatically backed up to my cloud storage, and that's where we found a conversation between her and Devin. One message stood out. Krista wrote, "The bank froze the money. Need Miles to verify in person." Devin replied, "He's still on the rig for 10 more days. Tell him there's an emergency with your mom. Get him to authorize you." Then came another message. "If that doesn't work, we'll use Plan B." Krista replied, "I'm not comfortable with Plan B." Devin answered, "It's just insurance money. He works a dangerous job for a reason. People have accidents all the time." 3 weeks later, the court hearing finally took place. Krista sat across the room with her lawyer. Devin was nowhere to be seen. In fact, he had disappeared 2 days after being served legal papers. He took the remaining cash and several pieces of Krista's jewelry with him, exactly the same pattern he had used with the other women. The judge reviewed the evidence carefully. Bank transfers, forged documents, phone records, text messages. When she reached the conversation about Plan B and insurance money, she stopped reading and looked directly at Krista. "Mrs. Harrington," the judge said calmly, "do you understand the legal consequences of conspiracy to commit insurance fraud?" Krista's lawyer whispered urgently in her ear. Krista tried to respond. "It wasn't like that, Your Honor." He was joking. "Save it for criminal court," the judge interrupted. After reviewing the documents, the judge removed her glasses and spoke again. "In 30 years on the bench, I have rarely seen such a clear case of premeditated financial deception inside a marriage." Her ruling came quickly. Every asset Krista had taken would be returned to me. The house remained solely mine. Her request for spousal support was denied, and the evidence of fraud and forgery was forwarded to the district attorney. 6 months later, I stood on the porch of a small cabin in the mountains outside Missoula, Montana. The property had always been owned by my holding company. Krista had never even known it existed. 40 acres of forest, a quiet river nearby, and complete silence. I had retired early from the oil industry. 27 years was enough. Between my investments, savings, and natural gas royalties from land in Arkansas, I had more than enough money to live comfortably. Occasionally, my old neighbor Harold would call with updates from Odessa. I eventually sold the house there. Too many memories. Not enough good ones. One evening as the sun set behind the mountains, I poured myself a glass of bourbon and sat on the wooden porch swing I had built. For the first time in years, nobody expected anything from me. No crew waiting for instructions. No wife pretending she missed me. Just quiet wind moving through the pine trees. My phone rang. A Canadian oil company offering a consulting position. Good money. Minimal travel. Just sharing the experience I'd gained over decades. I'll think about it, I told them, and I would, but not tonight. Tonight was for something else. Peace. And the simple realization that for the first time in my life, I was finally living on my own terms.